I'm Lori McVitty, Distinguished Engineer and Chief Evangelist with F5, and I am joined here today by F5 Technical Fellow Gilad Braa and our Distinguished Engineer and CTO for Systems, Joel Moses. And we wanted to talk today about a topic that everybody's talking about, but we wanted to talk specifically about how it's going to impact applications. And yes, it's AI. So I know, no one's surprised, but you know, that's the thing that is on everyone's mind right now. And it is really important because there are going to be some significant impacts from AI on applications and the infrastructure that delivers them. So I'm going to start by asking Gilad, and reminding me he only has a few minutes here. Okay. You know, what, in your opinion, is going to be the impact of AI on applications, maybe the biggest ones?
It depends on the timeline, right? Over time, it'll be bigger and bigger. In the short term, there's a whole new set of concerns around security. There's slightly longer term, we're going to find that the mode of interaction, everybody's going to have some sort of chat element to their app. They may continue to have GUIs, but these GUIs may be different. They may be dynamically generated by the AI. They'll tend to have a lot less layering of navigation and menu to get to here or there because the AI can figure this out on the fly. You're going to basically see some breaking down of silos because the chat session is a place where you can, you know, ask the thing to make your wishes come true, and it can go off and call various APIs and integrate things in a way that we haven't seen before. And that's probably the biggest thing, the breaking of the silos, which eventually reverberate throughout the industry in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that? Like breaking down the silos? Like one, I love that you said APIs, right? Woo, yes, of course, APIs. But right, the silos. So what do you mean by that?
So from a user perspective, an app is an interface. It's a thing on the Apple Store, right? They're not concerned with all the things we're concerned with at F5, how you deploy them and how you actually get them there, right? But each of these apps is its own little universe, right? There are very weak ways of communicating between them, cut and paste, or some of them occasionally can swap you to the other one and you go to a different screen and so forth. What will happen is that you're going to formulate your requests either through voice or through type chat or a very customized UI that it generated on the fly. And you can ask it things that pertain to multiple apps, right? I'm booking a trip. The classic, travel is a great example. Everybody loves it because it's so hard, right? There's airlines, there's hotels, there's sites, there's visas, there's a million things you have to do. And you just tell the thing that you need to do it. And it'll go off and do these things on your behalf. Personal assistants are already on their way to becoming a thing.
Absolutely.
And so this idea of the app as a box that's siloed from the others is going to go away.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary,
yeah.
Joel.
I mean, it has a huge impact on the way people use applications. These AI orchestrator systems, things like LangChain or AutoGPT, or coming in the future, you're going to have something like a Siri Plus or an Amazon Extreme, Amazon Echo Extreme. Those will be gateways into these orchestration systems that are AI-backed, and they'll actually do a lot of the API talking to these applications for you. So instead of navigating click-wise through a site, step 1, step 2, step 3, fill this blank in, do this, you simply ask it to do something fairly complex, and it will perform those steps on your behalf. So that's a completely different way of looking at application interactivity.
Okay, here's a question that you didn't expect, but it's driven by what Joel said, so blame him, okay?
Blame you.
Blame him. So, right, when you say the orchestrator is going to interact with these APIs, does that mean ultimately that API discovery and common specifications that will allow more dynamic calls of APIs is going to actually happen? What do you think?
Absolutely. So I want to be very clear. It does not obviate the need for security mechanisms on application sets. In fact, it makes them alternately much more difficult to perform, but much more important to do. So an API that is being used by one of these orchestration systems still has to do an authentication step. It still has to do session management. It has to generate the right tokens at the right time. The endpoints, when they're accessed, have to be accessed in the way that the API specification tells you to do it. So there's still a lot that has to be done. The API still needs to be secured. It still needs to be managed.
Gilad, what do you think? I mean, is that like the composable, right? A dynamically composable
So
application?
making it composable is always a challenge. There's a plus and a minus side here. On the one hand, you'd like to have more metadata on these APIs to make it easier because they're now being called by something mechanical that has to automate all this. On the other hand, it is much better than the mechanical things we had in the past of understanding. It may be able to actually read the human readable documentation, assuming there is one. And again, there'll be a need, at least either you have human readable documentation for the AI to read, or you have some sort of metadata formulation for the AI to read to give it some idea of what it's calling and how. And the pressure to do that it will come from the end user, from consumers, because it's just so much more convenient for them in the end, I think.
Right, and that's, I mean, it's driven by AI in a way because AI is going to kind of force that issue. I don't want you to do it for me.
You can't do it otherwise. So yes, it's opened a possibility that people did not have before. But once they have it, they will very quickly take it for granted because they're people. They are people, yeah.
They are people. So Gilad mentioned earlier, right, breaking down silos and apps, and we also know there'll be more, right, maybe apps that are supporting all of this, and that's going to create like pressure on infrastructure.
Okay.
So Joel, that's one of your favorite topics.
Yeah, AI is incredibly expensive in terms of compute, especially generative AI and large-scale models with billions upon billions of parameters. And again, think about the model as if it were training up a raw intern and stuffing that raw intern full of information, both public and private. When you stuff it full of private information, you want to make sure that that intern stays on the right path, stays on track. That means you need to watch the output, check the output for hallucinations, incorrect information. It also means that you're kind of duty-bound, since this is a representation of information that could be private. You want to protect that model. Protection of the model today is largely being done by infrastructure protections, putting it behind gateways or binding it to the machine underneath like OpenVINO does with its security add-on. All of these things have to be thought of. So you talked about the front side of AI and how it's going to impact applications. The structural backside of applications is also due for a change.
Well, that makes sense because it's a significant architectural shift, right, as well. And that always going to cause disruption, right, especially on the back end.
Correct.
So Gilad, you know, what do you think about that? Any other like strange impacts we should watch for?
Well, so one thing that this is really more in Joel's bailiwick, but the connections between these various pieces of infrastructure internally, what's sometimes referred to as east-west versus north-south, they become, there's a need for more monitoring and control on that end than there was before.
It's not sufficient just to control the ingress. You also, especially with things like RAG usage or retrieval augmentation on these models, you also have to watch the egress. And that's going to require much more sophisticated tooling than we have today.
That's also an interesting kind of side effect, is that when we think about data sources, they're usually like these big, right, huge systems that sit in the back and they're protected by, like, you know, I don't know, medieval knights, right? I mean, you can't get at it. But as we move to AI, we're starting to incorporate like smaller, right, purpose-built data sources that are databases, right, basically, but they're data sources and they're bringing them into the application architecture proper, which also changes a lot of the silos and, right, the APIs and everything else that's used.
Remember, these are data sources, though, that can actually explain themselves to you based on the prompts that you give them. So it's not the security threat in that is not as it's not like a SQL server that's compromised and you have the attacker has to figure out the structure of the data, the way the data was stored, and look for sensitive pieces of information. You can steal a model and simply tell it, give me the sensitive pieces of information. So protection of those models is going to be paramount.
Agree. Wow. We're just about out of time, but I want to thank you both because you're always enlightening and interesting and you know your stuff. So it's really great to talk to you. So thank you both and thank you all for watching.